Recently, I finished Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs, founder of Apple. It's a fascinating read, and it just made me realize how much my life's been impacted every day by Steve Jobs and his company. For instance, I have my iPhone that is with me pretty much all the time when I'm awake. Yesterday I had 26 phone calls on it. I had a pile of emails. I text from it. I tweet from it. I check the internet from it. I get my news and my sports from it. Every day has his fingerprint on my life. Well, actually, I open up my MacBook Pro on a daily basis as well. So it's interesting to read about Steve Jobs, and you get a glimpse into why Apple is what Apple is, why they give such incredible attention to detail. And as they said, they wanted to create products not that consumers wanted, but what consumers would want when they created it. So Steve Jobs' fingerprints, even though the guy is dead, his fingerprints are all over his organization. He's the founder. Well, the founder of Christianity is Jesus. And his fingerprints are, or at least should be, all over the movement that he created. So if you read through the Gospels, if you read through Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, where the stories of Jesus are, you find the themes that Jesus really highlights: forgiveness of sin from God and establishing a relationship with God and being able to live life with meaning and purpose, and how God really cares about people who live on the fringe, the disenfranchised, and the poor. And then when people become followers of Jesus, how they're agents of love and peace and reconciliation and blessing to the people in which they live around. And how, as people, as followers of Jesus, we live for other people. We don't live for ourselves. So you read through the Gospels and you find out a lot about Jesus. Well, one of the interesting things you find out about Jesus is his hesitancy with crowds. We're enamored with crowds. I mean, we go to a stadium or an arena where our favorite band is playing and the place is packed, and there's this energy in that place. If you go to a football game, if you go to an NFL game, maybe the Bills are playing and the stadium is just full of 60 to 80,000 people, there's a charge from being together. Truth of the matter is, in church world, we like crowds. We really talk about our weekend services being full, and then when that crowd comes and it gets too crowded, we want to build buildings so we can have a bigger crowd of people. Interesting thing about Jesus is his hesitancy with crowds. Crowds would follow Jesus. In fact, if you read through the book of Mark particularly, you see the word crowds in a lot of places. Crowds would kind of hear about him and they'd follow him, and Jesus would teach them, and Jesus would sometimes feed them, and Jesus would heal them. But it was interesting, when it would come to really understanding what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, when it really came to growing as one of his followers and to getting it, Jesus knew that somehow crowds were counterproductive to the kind of people he was really trying to shape. For instance, you come to one place, it's in Luke chapter 14, it's verse 29, and it says, verse 25, and it says, large crowds were traveling with Jesus. So there was this group of people that were really kind of pushing in on Jesus. And it's as if Jesus says in his mind, I don't think they get what it means to follow me. So he says this, he turns to them and he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and his children, his brothers and his sisters, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So it's like Jesus is saying, I think the crowd's getting too big. Let's thin it out and talk about what it really means to follow me. There's another place in John chapter 6 where it says the crowds were pressing in on Jesus, and his disciples say Jesus gave them hard teachings. And then you come to John chapter 6, verse 66, and it says, from this time on, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. When Jesus really wanted to form a group of followers who got it and really learned what it meant to follow him, he didn't go for a crowd. He went for 12. So you read in Mark chapter 3, Jesus went up onto a mountain. He called 12, his disciples, to be with him and to learn from him. Well, in life communities, we really talk about the value that size matters. And that's why life communities are limited to 40 people. And it's not because we don't like crowds. We're going to talk about the good thing of crowds. Really, it's this issue. If the goal is really about forming individuals to be Jesus followers, then size really does make a difference. Now, truth matter is in church world, and I'm sitting in a church building right now. In church world, we really are kind of enamored with crowds. When our building gets full on the weekend, on a Sunday service or a Saturday night service, and it gets crowded, that we consider to be a great thing. And so kind of the word gets out in the street that this is a crowded church. So what happens is more people come and it gets more crowded. And then we say, you know what? We need to build a building in order to fit the crowd. So we build a building and we get a bigger crowd. And then here's what tends to happen on average in churches, that 70% of every dollar that's given in a church is really to facilitate that crowd for an hour or two on a Sunday morning, as if that's the real priority in shaping Jesus followers. Well, obviously, as I said, Jesus didn't have a problem with crowds gathering around him, but he knew that it wasn't the best place to grow. Life communities are shaped really to help you grow as a follower of Jesus and for you to help other people become and grow as a follower of Jesus. And let me serve up a couple of reasons why we think size matters in helping that happen. One is tangible mission. We really grow as Jesus followers when we are engaged in tangible, hands-on mission. There can be a tendency in church to really give mission and ministry to a few gifted people that we pay to do it for all the rest of us. And so then for most of us, what it really means to be engaged in mission is to show up for an hour, maybe two, on a Sunday morning, help out a little bit, and pay the bills. Well, that's not God's design. Jesus really knows we grow best as his followers when we roll up our sleeves, when we discover the gifts and abilities that he's given to us, when we serve people outside of the church, and we get to know people who aren't a part of his family, and we're stretched, and we grow in the process. Being involved in tangible mission. Knowledge about the Bible is really valuable as a Jesus follower. But, we really don't get any marks for knowing Jesus' stories. In fact, being a Jesus follower isn't really about the accumulation of information. It's when we use all that God has placed in us, and we follow Jesus where Jesus went, and then we do the kinds of things that Jesus did, that tangible expression of our faith, that's when we really grow. And so in life communities, we say that if you really want to become like Jesus, it really means being involved in tangible mission, and that best happens when we're in groups of about up to 40. So that's the first kind of reason why size really matters. But there's a second one, and it's really closely linked to that, and that's active participation. We embrace the fact that Jesus really has gifted every one of his followers to be a player in the kingdom. Now, the New Testament, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Romans, in the book of Romans, and in different places like Ephesians chapter 4 really talks about how every follower of Jesus is given gifts in order to advance what God wants to do in the world. And Ephesians chapter 4 says that you become mature, you kind of grow up as a follower of Jesus, not when you realize you have gifts, not when you can say what your gifts are, but when you're actually putting your gifts into practice and you're playing in the kingdom. Often we sit in benches or chairs like this on a Sunday morning or a Saturday night, and we observe. We observe somebody speak. We observe a great music team. And again, very gifted individuals do their thing. But what tends to happen is when we're an observer or a spectator is we accumulate knowledge, but we don't exercise. And the Bible is really clear that you were meant to be a player. So when you kind of, again, roll up your sleeves, take your gifts and abilities, and you serve other people, kind of in the name and the love of Jesus, and you become actively engaged outside of the church, and you take steps of faith. And in other words, you go places in serving people you never really thought you could, and your spiritual muscles kind of get sore, and you go places where God has to show up and give you power to do what you really can't do on your own. That's when you really grow as a follower of Jesus. And that's what Ephesians 4 says. You grow up when you become an active participant. So we're saying, well, it really matters then how you shape who you are as a group of Jesus followers. We're saying size matters because as you get larger than 40 and you get toward 100 and you get toward 200 and you get toward 1,000, the tendency is to become a spectator when really you were designed to become an active player. So tangible mission, active participation. Let me serve up one more, and that's community. We weren't really designed to function well as Jesus followers on our own. We really function best when we're known and when other people know us. When we're with a group of people that can encourage us and we're the group of people that we can encourage them. When we're with a group of people that we can really be a support to them. And then when our week's been really crappy and something really difficult's happened in our life, they can come around us and support us, and that group of people that we know and have invested in and they've invested in us, they can pray for us. So yeah, in life communities, you encourage one another, you support one another, you pray for one another, but let's just be honest, you have fun together as a group as well. In Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 47 is really a picture of the first followers of Jesus after Jesus' death and resurrection. And it's one of the things it says about them is they ate together in their homes with really glad hearts. It meant they really just didn't come together every weekend for a little bit and kind of say hi to each other. They experienced life together. They did community together. So size matters. Life communities are up to 40 people in size because we really think to be a follower of Jesus, tangible mission matters, active participation matters, and experiencing community matters. Now, back to this issue of crowds. Truth is, crowds can be a blast. And so every month, life communities get together in an area, in a region, for maybe what we'll just call a Jesus party, where you have food and you have music and you have baptisms and you have stories of God at work. But in reality, when you come together as a large group of people and you celebrate what God is doing, there's great energy in that. So in life communities, size matters. And why does size matter? Because we really want you to grow as a follower of Jesus. We want to grow as followers of Jesus. And we want to help you help others become and grow as followers of Jesus.